everyone, to the 2015 CSU Cleveland International Film Festival Filmmaker Panels. I think this is number 8, hopefully in a series. And our first panel, as you can see, is the documentary filmmaking process. We have a beautiful slate of individuals who are filmmakers and film professionals heavily involved in the process of documentary filmmaking. The order of the day is this, that we will start with some general questions that I'll throw out to the group, sometimes directed at individuals, but largely open it up for discussion, and we encourage that the filmmakers create a discussion. It's not me interviewing each person individually. After about an hour, we'll open it up to Q&A for the audience, so you will have plenty of opportunity to ask questions of this illustrious panel. Everybody turn off their phones. That includes me.
Sure.
Also, I will do an introduction for each filmmaker, starting at the left. We have Mike Addy. His most recent feature documentary, In Country, had its world premiere at the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival and its international premiere at Hot Docs in Toronto. Mike's previous work has shown at major film festivals such as Silver Docs, the San Francisco International Film Festival, and the Black Mariah Film and Video Festival. He's a 2013 Sundance Documentary Film Program Fellow and was named one of the Independent's 10 Filmmakers to Watch for 2014. Mike is a lecturer, he's an educator such as myself, in the Department of Radio, Television, and Film at Northwestern University, and the Associate Director of the department's new MFA program in Documentary Media. Welcome, Mike. Oh, yeah. Perfect.
They switched.
They switched. Well, we'll go over here. Abhay Kumar. This is Abhay Kumar, over here. He's an independent filmmaker born and raised in Chandigarh, India. He studied mass communication in Delhi, and his short films have earned numerous awards and critical praise from festivals around the world, including screenings in India, Korea, and the Netherlands, where at the IDFA Fest in Amsterdam, his film had its world premiere and placed second for Best Debut Film. His most recent film, and the one screening at the Cleveland International Film Festival, is Placebo, which also screened this week at Carnegie Mellon University and will play soon at the Hot Docs Festival in Toronto. I was able to watch that film last weekend, and it's a moving, sometimes comic, sometimes disturbing look at students attending a highly competitive medical college in India, a college with an inordinate number of suicides. So an amazing and interesting film. I will say I've only been able to see 2 of the films of the panelists here, largely because their films are, the other films are showing this weekend. So you have time to watch some of the films of some of these filmmakers, and I'm sure they'll take the opportunity to tell you when their films are screening. Next on tap is Maggie McKay, who is Director of Nominations for the Film Independent Spirit Awards. She's worked as a freelance programmer and writer, Hollywood assistant, on-set production coordinator, and senior coordinator of the Sundance Documentary Fund. She joined Film Independent in 2003. Maggie's interest in film developed as a child in her hometown of New York City, where she spent hours with her mother at Film Forum, watching material highly inappropriate for her age. Maggie went on to discover the now-defunct Rare Bird video, where she spent an inordinate amount of time in the store's odd-smelling but deeply inspirational basement, which housed thousands of titles, old and obscure, and a notably patient staff that never kicked her out. Envious. Maggie holds a bachelor's degree in English and Film Studies from the University of Delaware and a master's degree in Literature and Film Studies from Claremont Graduate University. Next is Rob Montague, a director, producer, and videographer from Lakewood, Ohio. It's near Cleveland, I understand. He has worked on it's your first film, right?
My first film, yes.
First film, but he's worked on a wide variety of music videos and concert films for such bands as Taking Back Sunday, Grizz Folk, and David Ramirez. He's the co-founder of the boutique production company Late Morning Films. His current film, the one screening at the Cleveland International Film Festival, is Long Way to the Top, which I also was able to see this last week and found myself totally enveloped in the world of traveling rock performers. It created a milieu that you're able to fully experience, which is, we'll talk about that idea with documentary as we get going. So, welcome, Rob. Next is Dana Nachman. She was born and raised in New York, but currently resides in Northern California with her husband and 3 kids. Her films, Batman Begins, The Wish Heard Around the World, which is currently at the Cleveland International Film Festival, and her other films, Witch Hunt, Love, Hate, Love, and The Human Experiment, have premiered and screened at Toronto, Tribeca, Slam Dance, and IDFA film festivals. She's been the recipient of numerous awards, including 3 Emmy Awards, the Edward R. Murrow Award, and numerous jury and audience awards at U.S. film festivals. Her films have been seen by millions of people on various networks, including MSNBC, the Oprah Winfrey Network, and PBS. Dana graduated from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut with a dual degree in Middle Eastern Studies and International Relations. She received a master's degree from NYU in broadcast journalism. Dana is a guest journalist lecturer at Stanford University currently. And then Doug, there he is. I'm sorry, Douglas. We just went over that. Douglas, he goes by Douglas Tarola, has directed 4 and produced 9 documentary films. These include the award-winning film An Omar Broadway Film, which premiered at Tribeca and it was acquired by HBO. All In, the poker movie, which received the Grand Jury Prize for Best Documentary at Cine Vegas. And Hey Bartender, which premiered at South by Southwest and then enjoyed a theatrical release. Douglas attended Miami University and Columbia University and has worked as a screenwriter for Paramount, Universal, Fox, Warner Brothers, Sony, and New Line. Earlier in his career, he worked on films with directors Woody Allen, Robert Benton, and Penny Marshall. In fact, his first job in the film business was as a production assistant on the movie When Harry Met Sally. His most recent film, Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead, The Story of the National Lampoon, features interviews with many alumni and supporters of the Lampoon, including Kevin Bacon, Chevy Chase, P.J. Rourke, Judd Apatow, Ann Beats, John Landis, Christopher Buckley, and Henry Beard. The film had its world premiere at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival and will go into theatrical release later this year. Let's give a round of applause to all of our panelists. Next, I did not introduce myself. I'm Professor Kim Neuendorf of the School of Communication here at Cleveland State University and your moderator today. Let's start out the discussion. I guess because I teach documentary and I also teach film history, I always like to know who are your favorite documentarists or what are your favorite films, if any of them inspired you, or made you decide to go in the other direction. What influenced you, if anything?
Bruce Brown's Endless Summer. I love that movie, 100%.
Al Maisels.
Okay, we should tell the group, those who don't know the Maisels, Al Maisels, the surviving Maisels brother, there were 2, died.
David is surviving, right? David is still alive.
No, he's not. He died in,
He died
I'm sorry,
too?
he died in
Oh, yeah,
1987.
right, sorry.
Yeah.
It's
He
my
died long
wish
ago.
that they would still be alive. It's a
Yes.
huge loss.
Yeah, so the second, the Maisels brothers, would you like to say, I'll let you say something about the Maisels brothers because they were so influential.
The Maisels are a pair of brothers. Al usually gets more sort of fanfare, but David was his partner all the way. They were a pair of documentary filmmakers who really sort of, they didn't invent it, but they really gave birth, I think, in America to the cinema verite style of filmmaking, which, if you don't know, which I'm sure you all know, is a way of telling story that involves allowing a camera to roll on a subject long enough and free enough to allow the truth to sort of emerge on its own. And they made films like Salesman, Grey Gardens. They're just unparalleled, absolutely unparalleled. And Al, the last brother, the final brother, died recently.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just had a new film at Sundance, which is not really new. It was old footage, Marlon Brando doing an interview from the 60s, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
And it's been airing now. It was just on
It was on
TCM.
Turner Classic Movies. Yeah, I didn't want to dwell on it, but I was very surprised and impressed that Turner Classic Movies, which is mostly old Hollywood, set aside a whole evening after Al Maisels died in
Yeah.
honor of the Maisels. And they did show Meet Marlon Brando, which I had never seen before.
That's great.
So it's old footage, new doc. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's amazing. You can be a documentarist well into your 80s. How old was Al? Does anyone know? 87?
86, I think.
Yeah. 80. And recently here in Cleveland, another cinema verite or direct cinema filmmaker from the 60s who's still making films, 85-year-old Fred Wiseman was just at our local Cinematheque. I got to meet him and talk to him, and that's just, you never stop. A documentarist always documents.
It's because you can't retire.
Perfectly put. Great. Anyone else? Any influences? Specific films, filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you see, I think you see films at a certain time of your life, which it looks like most of the audience would be that time, but somewhere like, and those films have a inordinate effect on you,
Right.
just like music. Like no one's favorite band they meet, when they're 50. It's like always somebody from a certain age. So for me, there was this filmmaker named Penelope Spheres.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And she made a bunch. She'd actually worked like at SNL a little bit, but she made this trilogy of which the first two, they're called Decline of the Western Civilization.
Love
Great
those
title.
movies.
And one is about punk, like basically LA kids in the punk rock movement in the early 80s, and the other one is like heavy metal. And they're a combination of these sort of interviews and then sort of following people around as they are in these rock and roll worlds. And I think I love those movies, but also the fact, and a little bit like the Maisels, is that she went on to go make Wayne's World, which if anybody knows the movie Wayne's World. So it was like she's sort of back and forth between the two mediums. I love the Maisels. One of the things though that I've taken from them, because I was lucky enough to meet him, is that he went and did it when they were first getting started. They did a ton of films for IBM. Now for some filmmakers, it's blasphemy to go like work. Like, I just got to go make these movies, but they were supporting themselves making movies for big corporations. Even the Meet Marlon Brando was a press junket that they got themselves in for that I believe they were being paid for, and then something else happened with that footage. So I think the idea that those two filmmakers, or the brothers and Penelope, have had long careers doing multiple things to tell stories. So that she would be
Yeah.
a big one for me.
Great, great. Anyone else?
I think
Chime in?
for me, there was a film I saw actually when I was in college called Sherman's March by a filmmaker named Ross McElwee. And it's just one of these films that it's sort of an unexpectedly fun and insightful film, and I'd really recommend it to anybody sitting in the room. And I don't work in, he's a filmmaker who works in sort of a personal narrative style. He's going around with the camera, and the camera, as he carries it, sort of brings about these interactions. It wasn't so much that I wanted to work in that style, but it really opened up my idea of what documentary could be. And it sort of started me on a journey of exploring that more. And so I would really encourage you to look at that film, and I saw it when I was kind of like a junior in college, I think, and it was a really big moment for me.
Excellent. Okay.
So I come from a background of fiction, and I was at the Tribeca Film Festival 2011 with my short film, and that's where I saw this documentary which ended up winning the festival. It's called Bombay Beach. It's not a very well-known documentary, but and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I used to make fun of people who make documentaries and who sit on panels. But that film just made my mind open up into new ways of telling stories and using narrative tools to tell a real story. And the director of the film, she just took a handy cam and she just followed these characters throughout one of the most interesting neighborhoods in the US, Salton City in California, I think. And I had soundtrack by Bob Dylan, and it just like opened my mind completely. And I had no plans to make a documentary. I was working on a narrative fiction feature script, but then having seen that film somewhere, it just pushed me towards being open to the idea, and I ended up spending the next 4 years making my first documentary. So
Very cool.
yeah.
I actually have a follow-up, but wanted to make sure Dana had an opportunity. Do you want to chime in on the first topic?
I kind of agree that it's a time period in your life, or for me it was. I guess the first documentary I ever saw, I was a broadcast journalist, so I was used to telling stories in a similar way to documentary, but much shorter. But the first documentary I remember really keying into was The War Room. I probably saw it, I don't know what year it came out, but around 1994 or something, and I was just riveted with it, and I loved the way they told the story and how kind of down and dirty it was, but then as I became, years went on in my career telling 3-minute stories, and I kind of felt like hamstrung by that. This slew of movies came out, like Capturing the Freedmans and Spellbound and Murder Ball, and I guess they were all around, I don't know, 2003-ish or something. And at that moment, I was like, I saw these movies, and they all, rocked my world at the same time, and I was like, that's what I want to be doing. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. And feel free to, respond to each other too.
Sure.
These are terrible.
Discussion group.
They're awful, no.
They're
Not really.
Well, something that Abhay said made me think of, and by the way, can someone back there switch their names at some point, at least before we go to Q&A? So turn it off and switch it. Thank you. You talked about narrative and how your work was narrative, and having seen your film, I see narrative infused in your documentary work. And when I teach a documentary class here at Cleveland State, and we always begin the semester with definitional. What is a documentary, and where have the boundaries stretched? And I think it's changed over the years. And there are now what are called some people call hybrid documentaries, which include clear narrative components. And I think I would characterize your film that way. And I wondered if I also want you folks to speak about the films, those who have a film at the festival. Sorry. With regard to this as well, is it, because like Mike already you said, yours is not like Sherman's March. What is it like?
Yeah.
What kind of approach, what kind of style?
I wouldn't say it's purely, the hybrid term is obviously, it's a huge gradation in itself,
Yes.
but our film is about a group of men who are reenacting the Vietnam War, so the reenactment itself is in a sense a fiction, and it's something that they've created, and we're filming in a way to look like an like a Vietnam War film. So in order to prepare to make the film, we obviously looked at a lot of the big war films, but we also looked at a lot of the, just like we looked at great war documentaries, but also just great war films. So like The Thin Red Line and some of the big Vietnam War movies like Full Metal Jacket. And I wouldn't say that, I feel this obligation to insert narrative components into it, although it's something that I enjoy doing, and I feel like it's mostly just what serves the story the best. And that to me, since this film is about a group of people who were creating a narrative of Vietnam, it seemed clear that that was the way to do it and to immerse ourselves. And so the condition that we had in order to film with these guys, because they do this very immersive reenactment where they dress up in period gear and they pretend like it's Vietnam for 3 days, was that we had to dress up. So we had to dress as Vietnam War correspondents, my co-director and I. And so we wore, dressed in our fatigues and had boots, and the only modern thing we had was our camera. But what that did was it made us characters in that narrative, and they talked to us like it was 1968, and they were talking about their experience in the war. And so it just sort of emerged organically. It just happens, and I feel like filmmakers are more open to that now, it seems. I wouldn't say it's not the first time. It's been happening since the 50s and 60s, but it does feel that there is a growing interest and a growing acceptance to it.
Okay. Yeah, and to put it into context, sorry, as a professor, I always teach about, the era, and you guys are probably familiar, around 1989 or 1990 in America anyway. That was when Michael Moore's Roger Me and Errol Morris's Thin Blue Line came out, and both of those stretched the definition of a documentary and were even criticized as maybe not being a documentary. Particularly Thin Blue Line had reenactments. So it started with reenactments, but then it becomes fuzzier, as you said. There's a very fuzzy line between now the documentary content and the narrative content in documentaries. So anyone else want to chime in on that?
I guess like right now there's the big discussion in the documentary world about nonfiction filmmaking versus more traditional, which is traditional usually means oddly like when you're seeing someone interview like 30 for 30s, sort of things like that, where you're seeing somebody interviewed and it's intercut with different archive footage or footage like that. I think that that's a discussion that carries a lot of weight in our community, but really is just generated by about 100 or a couple hundred people that that probably see movies more on screeners or from links from their buddies that actually go to the theater. So I think it's really like what is the best way to tell a movie? In other words, what is the best way to tell a movie? To invoke our film, oh wait, they switched me. Okay, so to invoke our film takes place mostly in the 70s and 80s. And the influence of telling nonfiction filmmaking, we had just produced a nonfiction film called Actress, which is an awesome film if you get a chance to see it. So we were sort of, as producers, seen as this champion of the most hardcore definition of you're just sitting back and watching this person do what she does, supposedly. But that, with some movie magic to it. But really, it's what it is, and it's a great film. So we were thinking, Matt, we should maybe try and tell our story like that, which would mean basically following a bunch of 60 and 70-year-old men and some women, like around now, and then maybe reminiscing about what happened in the 70s and showing a couple things, because the influence of that debate is so strong. My feeling ultimately was, and then recreations, but we have some celebrities in our movie, and I didn't think we were going to like recreate Bill Murray or John Belushi or Chevy Chase. So we were really left with the traditional, as they would say, where we're going to interview these guys and a couple ladies and use the footage and the art materials that we had in a certain way. Because that was the way, in my mind, to immerse ourselves most in that era, as opposed to cutting out to like four old guys at a deli talking about the good old days or trying to sell something now. So I think for me, it's really what services the story best, and then I would say, just because of the forum that we're at with aspiring filmmakers, is how you can get your movie made. I mean, that's just part of it. You could be like, you're gonna be the guy at Starbucks who's talking about making movies for 10 years, you're gonna go make a movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, the idea is to make movies. At least for the filmmakers that unless you want to be like the, what's the author of Confederacy of Dunces, like one book, or Ralph Ellison, one book, which you could maybe just do the one thing, but the idea is to get out there and make things. So if these are the tools you have at hand, or the people you have at hand, then go make it, as opposed to, well, I'm going to figure out, so that would be my approach.
Well, for me, I was a musician for 15 years, and I knew that very well, that world. And I had never seen anything that accurately portrayed what that life was like. And the Decline of Western Civilization is pretty much the only thing that I've seen that even resembles it, but it's not like that anymore, because now it's all work. There's no partying, this is a job. I've got to sell my merchandise and tour and things like that. And for me, I think it is, like what you said, you kind of just have to go out there and do it. And in some ways, you have to get creative. For me, I worked for some of the bands and did content for them just so I could get out on the road with them and follow them.
I think we came up with these classifications of fiction, non-fiction, hybrid, narrative, non-narrative to sort of organize our thoughts a little better. But at the end of the day, they are just classifications. And for me, I would not take them too seriously and think about what should a documentary be or what should a fiction be.
Yeah.
Like Douglas said, that we are here to tell the best possible story, and as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, it's your responsibility to hold yourself to a certain standard. That is it the best possible story I'm telling, and is it something which you would want to see?
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of follow and try to sort of reach a certain standard. And beyond that, and I think that's an exciting space to sort of be in, because then you're mixing and you're taking elements from non-fiction, using it in narrative, and vice versa. I think that's an interesting space.
Could you talk for a moment about what you do in your film? Having seen it's kind of interesting.
So my film was quite problematic in a lot of ways, because unlike a documentary where a filmmaker hears about a certain issue and then goes there with a certain prep to make a story about that issue, my film starts with my younger brother's accident, and I just go in there to document his recovery. But then what ends up happening is completely, absolutely unexpected. And so the film, like, I shot for a period of 2 years, full time. That's a lot of footage, with certain events cropping up, a character committing suicide, where the film is constantly shifting. It's shape shifting all the time. And so what we end up with is a hybrid documentary, like another classification, which uses a lot of animation, visual effects. There are portals, exploding. in a documentary shot in a handycam. So the idea was to constantly find out what is the story we're trying to tell, and the story essentially was bigger than us who were trying to tell it, because it's shifting all the time. So you're just trying to catch up all the time, that what is my responsibility and how should I tell this story the best possible way. And till the last day the edit was locked, the film was still changing, and that kind of demanded a hybrid narrative to sort of bridge those gaps, because you can't leave one part, because I'd been shooting like for 6 months making another film, and something would happen and that would make it another film. So we had so many films which had to be bridged. So I think the narrative, the hybrid elements kind of helped create that bridge.
I think, Dana, don't want to leave people out.
I mean, I would agree, and I think you want to be able to use whatever tools are in the toolbox to tell the story, which is the ultimate, most, story is king, obviously, to anything else. And so I think that, I agree with everybody that getting hung up on how you're going to tell it could hang you up and make you sit at Starbucks for 10 years. I think I usually work more traditionally, but maybe I'd like to move beyond that. But I mean, for Bat Kid, I had the idea of telling, I didn't really want the story to be, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this little boy who had cancer, and his wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation was to be Batman for the day, and they wanted 200 people to show up, and 25,000 people showed up, and 2 billion people watched it online. And so I really didn't want the story to be about his leukemia, but you have to talk about his leukemia. I also wanted the film to be for children and families and anyone, so we decided to make his backstory in animation. And I had that idea before I even shot one frame, but I was nervous about it because I had done sort of infographic animations, or infographic sounds bad, but whatever, informational in my other films, but this was like a big chunk, 10-minute chunk of animated in the beginning, and I was very nervous about it. Because it was just something I wasn't as familiar with.
Okay, well, I was going to ask, why were you nervous? Were you nervous about audience expectations, or maybe
I was nervous about, I've always had a funny relationship with animators because I don't really speak the same language as them, so I'll be like, oh, I kind of want this, and then that doesn't really translate to what they can do. So I was nervous about that. I was nervous about cost. Animations are expensive. But I just got really lucky and found this amazing animator who was, if I changed my mind, he wouldn't go back and say, well, that's going to be another $10,000. Like, he was amazing. And it was funny because I didn't actually see anything that he did really until I was basically had to lock it. And my editor said, they came in and they were kind of all in pieces, the animation. He's like, these are IKEA animations. They're not like, you have to put them together. And we were kind of up all night doing that. And, but they are brilliant. And people seem to have liked them, but that was nerve-wracking for me because it was a tool that I wasn't that comfortable with. But I think I'm happy with how it turned out. But I think that's a good example of kind of, taking a little risk, but just for what serves the story the best.
Yeah, well put. Maggie, could you kind of, from a programmer's perspective, talk about how is this changing the way that programmers and competition people who direct competitions look at what counts as a documentary, or how they're evaluated as well?
Over the years, you start to see some sliding around of categories. I tend to be pretty open to sort of where a film falls, but I would say that documentary, is the most fun sort of area to play because you really have this incredible freedom. And I think the most important thing going into a documentary from an outside point of view is to be very open to anything that may come to you. Absolutely. Because your story, some of the best docs I see year after year are documentaries that started out as one thing, and the filmmakers had a very clear view of the story they were going to tell. And a week into shooting, 6 weeks, 2 years into shooting, something happens and it upsets the entire story, and the story that they end up with is even more interesting than the story they started with, or in somehow enhances their story in a way that they couldn't have expected. And I totally agree with everybody on this panel, you have to be very open to using the tools in the toolbox. I think that the advice I give to narrative filmmakers about sort of the emotional and mental prep work is very different than the advice I give to documentary filmmakers. And a lot of times I tell documentary filmmakers who are prepping for something, especially if it's a new kind of approach or a different kind of story than they've told, is go watch other documentaries. I would not say that to a narrative filmmaker. It's too easy to get influenced by that. But documentary is so rich. There's so many different ways of telling a story that you can sometimes find an idea that you never thought of by watching somebody else's story unfold. So, but I love how it's all flows in and out of narrative, and sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, sometimes a reenactment will work for one film and not for another. Sometimes a lot of archival works for one film and not another. And I think as documentarians, you have to be very open to knowing, accepting when something doesn't work, and kind of going back and reworking it. But it's the greatest form of
Now,
filmmaking.
yeah, to bounce off what you just said, and Abe already gave an example, a very clear example of his film. Did any of the rest of you have surprises, fortuitous surprises that took you down a different road on this film or any other film?
I mean, we had a surprise. It's not at the dramatic surprise that Maggie's talking about, which does happen and is like awesome usually when it does. We had a gentleman who our film just briefly is about if anyone's known National Lampoon, it's a magazine, became this entertainment company. There's one of the founders of the magazine, 5 years into it, just leaves, and he says, "I'm never going to F you. I'm never talking to any of you again." Well, in real life, it's that he never talked to anybody again from this thing. He never did an interview about it, and he just left and was wealthy and didn't. That was it. So every interview we did with somebody, they're like, guy's name was Henry Beard. They're like, "Did you try and get Henry Beard? You'll never get Henry Beard." And we never got him. And we were like, okay, can we do this? And I actually went back and watched some movies, specifically music movies, where the lead singer was dead. One about Joe Strummer. So there was a movie about a guy who was not available to be interviewed. Another one about the Ramones. Two of the Ramones were dead when the movie was made. So, or one of them, Joey Ramone, the lead one, just to sort of go, okay, we can do this without this guy. 3 months into editing, I get a phone call. I said one last time, I'm like, let's just call this guy's number one last time. I had the girl with the nicest, sexiest sounding voice in the office call, because these guys, I had a feeling, all kind of like were still adolescent boys when it came to women. And it could only help. And lo and behold, like 2 hours later, it's like, "Hey, Doug, I hear you're doing great things with this film. Certainly love to talk to you." As if we hadn't tried to reach him a dozen times. But the movie had basically been constructed without him. And the movie was looking pretty good. But here was this guy that, at least for people within the world that follow the story, knew that. So we went and interviewed him, and he replaced some things. And so we had to sort of rework it to get him in, and he was great. Interestingly enough, there's a scene in the movie where he does leave, which we have other people talking about it, and the other people kind of told that story better than he did. So that he does not really tell the heart of this key scene where he's leaving. Even though that was part of it. But so that definitely changed things late in the game. So I would say if you follow the festival calendar, we were submitting, or trying to submit to Sundance, I guess was our choice to premiere, if we were lucky enough to get in. And those deadlines are due September, and we interviewed him 2 weeks before Labor Day.
I think in our film, it's amazing. In our film we had, I think this is probably something everybody's had experience with, is you think you know who your characters are, you think you know who the sort of key players are in your film, and then something happens in production or something happens during the edit that reveals something else. And we had an experience with a character who came, he wasn't even at the first sort of major event that we filmed, but later on we spent time with him, and he was a guy who, if you met him on the surface, he's this funny, jovial, like good-looking guy. And then as we spent time with him, we learned he's a vet who did 2 tours, that he's suffering from terrible PTSD. And you would have no idea if you met him in your day-to-day that this is something that he's dealing with. but that sort of dual layer of his outward persona and what he's dealing with inward became a big part of the story, and it was something that we had to incorporate much later into the film. And I think that he ended up being a big character, and it just was a really great experience of learning about how don't take people at face value, and that can be a really valuable experience of not just assuming you meet somebody and you understand them in a matter of minutes. And that's like the best part of working in documentary, is really getting to know people and connect with them. I find that that's the main reason why I want to keep working in this genre of filmmaking, is I love how the camera lets me interact with people, and always being open is really critical, because you would never get those kinds of moments, and he becomes sort of the heart of the film, and we didn't expect that to happen.
For my movie, one of the bands I was following, it was sort of by accident. One of the producers on the film had started managing this band called Grizz Folk. I was in LA visiting for Thanksgiving, and I just went to their first rehearsal and brought a camera, and they ended up being one of the main focuses of the film, and I followed them on their journey to Milan in front of 12,000 people, and then now they're on Letterman. So it was one of those things where I didn't plan it. The movie was about that journey, and then they ended up becoming huge, and that was completely unexpected and amazing.
As I'm hearing you talk, I have to bring out the old solve, the old question, because everybody has been all about story. The story is the thing. Of course, it is. For each of you, do you pick the story, or does the story pick you? What do you think?
In my case, it picked me, for sure.
I mean, you have like areas in which you like working, different themes or different spaces, and I think that for the case of this story, it was something I had been interested in conceptually not a really long time. I think it's, for me, I have to ask myself before starting any project, like, do I want to spend time with the people who are in this film? Because it's like a multi-year commitment, and you can't get out of it once you start. And will it really hold my attention as a story? And there are films that come along, ideas that people propose to me, that I'm like, oh, that could be a great film, and I know it could make money and be a big festival thing. But I'm like, no, it's just not what I want to do. I mean, you have to, every documentary I say is probably like at least a 3-year commitment, at least, maybe. And so you have to ask yourself, what do you want to be doing for those 3 years? And even if it seems like a story that's going to make you, bring you some success, like, do you really want to spend time in that space? It's very personal.
I don't know, it's a hybrid of both. I mean, I guess my first 3 out of my 4 films, when I learned about the subject, I was shocked by it, and then you kind of can't let it go in your mind, and then it turns into your next 3 to 4 to 5 years. And then the one that wasn't, in that case, my partner and I just came up with the idea, and that was just a little different, and it was a little more manufactured, which I don't know if it led to our best film, I don't know. But I would totally agree with that, about these people become your friends. And I remember with Bat Kid, when I first met the guy who played Batman, I talked to him on the phone, and I hung up the phone, I told my husband, I'm like, oh, that guy, like, what is it, Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world?
Yeah.
Like, that's what this guy is. And all the people who made Bat Kid are like the coolest people, and I just wanted to be friends with them all. And so they were always talking about their barbecues they had, and I'm like, can't wait till I'm in the barbecues. And I think that's what happens, aside from working with the people and having to deal with them and their craziness, which most people in documentaries have. They become your friend. I mean, for me, they've all become my friends. And so it's a brilliant thing, and I think it is people who you want to spend time with. But then I'm sure there's other documentaries that are very difficult, such as The Jinx that was just on HBO. I'm sure they don't want to become friends with him, and there's reasons to do those as well. And I think it depends what time of your life you're in and how you want to spend your time. It's a real privilege. I think the people are really, really important, the main characters of the film.
Or Ape, in your case too, you kind of knew some of the people, the subjects, but some of them, then they were in college, they kind of drifted away. You want to speak to that? I remember you spoke to that after your film.
Like I said, my film was, rather than like me choosing to do a story, I was just filming, and I wasn't even sure if I'm making a film. But then the film ends up chronicling the ups and downs of the relationship, because I embedded myself in an alien environment, like in a mid-school, and I was living with the students for 2 years like a student. So it starts from the characters being fascinated with the presence of a camera, to end up going, who are you and what are you doing here? You know, why are you still here? And you know, that sort of, so with that sort of story, you just sort of make sure you're present and you're not letting it slip by, not letting the moment slip by. So it's like you're always trying to catch up to the story rather than controlling it. So that was my experience.
Yeah, I mean, my experience has been so varied on each one. I mean, I certainly would agree that the people become your friends. I would say even beyond that, I think for the filmmakers, it's sort of I would say a multi-year affair that you have hopefully fond feelings about forever. For them, it is a lifetime marriage that, like, the movie does not stop when the movie's over, and it's definitely a relationship. I agree. You have to want to wake up with these people every day during the time. If you don't think you're gonna last with them, I think that's a different thing. Even though I'm sure certainly people make movies about people they don't like, but it's definitely but the subject, or at least some part of it, you have to want to be involved with for many years. But we've had situations. Our first film where we had to literally convince people over a year. It was about the first film was about a guy who was a member of a gang called the Bloods, and he was in prison, and he had snuck in a video camera into prison and gotten these tapes out to his mom, who was shopping them around for someone to try and make like street DVDs just to sell for like $10. And we saw this footage and we're like, this could be a movie, what they call like a found footage movie, where part of the like this footage that was shot. Bus 74 would be a great example of that. And it took months to, I mean, at one point we had to say, look, we're done, come back to us, because they just didn't understand. We're like talking about, we can get into a festival and this could be somewhere, and they're just like, we just want to go sell these like on the street. And that was like a long process, but ultimately we were able to convince them. Other things that I've just picked subjects that I liked. I mean, I made a movie about bars because I was a bartender at one point, and I just went to this one bar, which was supposed to be the best cocktail bar in New York, over and over until I wore these guys down. Or I wouldn't say that, until I think they trusted me that we could go. Sorry, that, because you know, a camera in a place with alcohol and adults is not really great for the business of that bar. And it took a long time to convince them, but when they did, they were all in. A matter of fact, we're playing at Tribeca for this film, and they're hosting the premiere party. So we became really good friends with them. So that was a good example. But I think it is just a long-term relationship, whether you like them or not.
We brought up tangentially the notion of funding, the idea of getting people to back you either in kind or money. Can we talk about funding? We have a lot of students in the audience, many of them mine, and so I wanted to shift for a second to advice to students, but can we start with funding? I like that that was you, Mike, that earlier said you can't retire from documentary.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
it's like, the hardest thing I think as a documentary filmmaker is figuring out how to sustain yourself in both mentally.
How do you do it?
Mentally and financially, physically, all of those things, because it's not like a 9-to-5 kind of job. You don't really get vacation. It's like, and there's a way in which, how do you figure out how you're going to do these films? And the really unfortunate problem with funding especially in the US right now, is that most of the money comes in really late in the process. So most funders don't come in until you're like mostly done with shooting, unless it's a film that, unless you're a really known quantity, or it's a film that people see a lot of financial resource in. For the case of our film, I worked with one other person, and we just kept our overhead really low. I mean, I shot with a camera that Canon 7D, which I'm sure some of you have, and we had like a mic, and that's basically it. So we could just go and do it, and that's a lot of what chooses how I tell the stories, and the stories I want to do is, can I do it with a really low overhead? For us with funding, we worked for a really long time. Both my co-director and I are teach, so we get summers off, which is fantastic, and we have a lot of flexibility with our schedules. But we did a Kickstarter early on, which was really good. We raised about just shy of $30,000 with that. And from there, it was a lot of small grants, a lot of very benevolent people who are helping us out along the way. We eventually did get a Sundance grant, which was nice to sort of push us over the edge. But I mean, it's not, I didn't make any money off of it. I mean, I think I'm pretty psyched that I'm at 0 right now, which feels good. But, you know, you don't do it for the money, clearly. You know, you have to figure out some way to make it work. And I juggled it in the past. I've juggled it with freelance work too. And I haven't really figured out what the balance is, honestly. And I don't think anybody gets to that place. Maybe somebody does.
Anyone else? What's your balance?
I mean, I would say I live in Silicon Valley. We do corporate videos, like the IBM discussion earlier. We do that to make money. We think, you know, for one corporate video, we could then probably make a documentary for a month or something. So it's balancing, you know, whatever your pay work is. I mean, for I also had a co-director for my first 3 movies, and he and I worked at the NBC station in the Bay Area, and so we did our first movie on our weekends and vacations and nights, and that film became our calling card. And so for we sold it. We took the money that, it's not a good business plan, as we always say, we took the money that we made after selling that and made our entire of our next film. We also, the 2 of us together, have all the skills pretty much it takes to make the movie, so our overhead was really low. But then, because we had those 2 movies, we were able to get investors for our 3rd movie. Partially, it was half grants and donations, half investors. And then for Bat Kid, this thing happened, which I had heard in Director Fantasia that it happened, that somebody just came in and paid for the whole thing, one investor. And I always thought that was an urban filmmaking legend, but it did happen once, so we'll see if it happens again. But so I think having the calling card of either a short or a real film, you know, not real film, a feature film that you can show that you could actually do this will make people invest potentially. And then having another job, whether it's teaching or corporate videos or freelance or something, Starbucks, anything.
When I started, I was waiting tables to fund my movie.
Yeah. Anything,
I
really.
got very lucky. It was one of those situations where I just put everything I had into it, bought my camera equipment and said, this is what I'm gonna do. And then as I was going, I ended up getting a couple faces in the film, and then it was, okay, let's show this to a couple people and see if we can get some real funding so I can go on the road and travel. And we got it was one of those situations where one investor came in and was like, hey, okay, there you go. Got very, very lucky, but
And then you
that's
hope
rare.
to sell that film,
Yeah.
and they'll do it again. And
Exactly. They're like, we'll give you money for another one if you can sell this
Right.
one. Yeah.
Right, but like you said too, that's not a good business plan. Oh, I got some money, I'm gonna
Oh,
spend it
no, I mean, and I
Yeah.
didn't mention that we didn't, like, I think similar to you, we didn't pay ourselves
Yeah.
Right.
for the first 2 movies at all,
Nope.
like 0. So it's hard, and I think grants are amazing, but they take a long time to come in. I mean, a long, long time.
I didn't pay myself either at all. It was
No.
all sweat equity completely. I was doing freelance
And
stuff
people like
and
that
still
too,
waiting
when they know you
tables.
work that way, they
Yeah.
say, oh, well, you know, if we invest in this, we know they're not gonna go off and spend our money, you know?
Yeah.
And, I mean, if they can tell that you're committed and have the passion to tell the story regardless of I mean, that's one thing is, a lot of people don't finish their documentaries for a lot of reasons. And so if you continually show that you're gonna start them, finish them, regardless of all the things that come in.
A lot of things can come
Yeah,
in the
a lot,
process, that's
okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add to that. Now, I'm not a filmmaker, I'll preface it by saying that. But I worked in documentary funding for a little chunk of time, and I actually have a very positive view of documentary filmmaking and moving forward. There are resources for documentarians, maybe in some ways more than there are for narrative filmmakers, because each kind of documentary, each subject, has a passionate group of people behind it. So, and the grants may take a long time to come in. It may take a lot of research and a lot of legwork to find that passionate person who will get behind you. But, and the resources may not always be financial. They may be a resource in the form of a programmer who totally believes in your work and will give you feedback in the middle of the night. Will talk to you over and over again and watch 80 cuts of your film and help you find a festival to program it and all of that. And luckily, the DIY movement, I think, in a lot of ways, has not always been so great for narrative filmmaking. But for documentary filmmaking, it has changed everything. And you really can say, go do it. Just do it. That is not always my advice to narrative filmmakers. It takes a lot. Sometimes
Two
that
different
doesn't
animals
work out.
completely.
Yeah, just go do it is not always the right advice for them. But for documentarians, you can also start with nothing and then add and add and add and build and build and build. And I do think that there is a huge passion for documentary filmmaking on every level. People want to see it more. People are watching it more.
There are more venues. I mean, depending on how you
showing
define documentary,
Yeah.
most of our cable channels have something that's fact-based,
Yeah.
throughout the entire day. It's huge.
Yeah, and just the accessibility is becoming sort of better, I think. So it's a little positivity. I'm not usually that positive, but a little positive.
And also the community, I think the community is so helpful, even though you don't want to, at some point you want to start paying your friends, and we all hope we get to that point at some juncture. But like people are so willing to go out on a shoot with you, I find, or do sound for you, or just write music. I mean, I had after we did a big Indiegogo campaign, I had probably 50 people writing to me could they donate music to Bad Kid. There's a lot of people around who are willing to work with you, which is an amazing. I think the documentary community is awesome.
It's a very
I'll be
supportive
positive
community.
too. Yeah.
I mean, it really is a supportive community.
It is.
And embedding yourself in that community, I think, is really important.
How would you recommend students, for example, do that?
I mean, I think if you're going to film school, there's your community right there. Your professors, anybody that comes to talk to you, your fellow students, your peers, and then watch everything.
Yeah.
Don't look at your cell phones when you're standing on the sidewalk. Watch people. I mean, it's just read everything.
Yeah.
Read the bus shelter signs. Read the magazine that's on the ground. I mean, read everything, watch everything, because documentaries aren't actually always about a subject that you know or a subject you're interested in. Somebody was telling me recently about a documentary that I can't really talk that much about, but will be coming eventually. And it got started because a woman was walking down the street, saw someone she thought she recognized, kept walking, and then thought, wait a minute, I know that person. She went back, and that person is now the subject of documentary. So if she'd been looking at her cell phone, it would have been that. So, I mean, it really is, documentarians watch the world and read the world, and if you don't make the space to do that, but that's your community.
Right. Well, and how, besides school, how do you get to know one another? What organizations, or festivals, so they're doing the right thing
Festivals.
right this minute.
Festivals, and I mean, any way you can connect with somebody who's interested in this kind of stuff. I mean, if you're making a documentary about Vietnam veterans, you find them and you talk to other filmmakers who have made filmmakers about that community. If you're making a film about National Lampoon, you talk to other filmmakers who've made documentaries about the comedy world. I think it's a really small community, and you do start to find each other.
Yeah.
And if you're a student, you start to connect with groups that want to help you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when my first film, I had never even been to a film festival ever. When we got into the Toronto Film Festival for our first film, and I literally just didn't know what to do. And so I looked at who was at the Toronto Film Festival the year before, and I literally started cold calling them, and got a hold of this guy named Doug Prey, who's a really nice guy, and he talked to me on the phone. I said, what's your 3 top things to know? He's like, he talked about the agent and how you want to go there with a good agent and this and that, and it was just so nice. I mean, I cold called, and I would say from the beginning of my career till now, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next, and I mean, I'll start by doing what you just said. I will call every person who's done a movie, or I'll watch the movie first. I'll make sure there's I mean, it's always just being persistent and continue. I'd say act like you're new at this every time. I mean, so I'll act, I'm sure, the same way you guys will on your next documentary. I'll pretend, because you are new to it. I mean, my next documentary is not going to be about Bat Kid. It's going to be about something that I'm sure I know nothing about. So it's starting fresh every time, and you have more contacts and more community. But
And to emphasize what I heard a couple of you say, Vietnam veterans groups, and I actually don't know, was Bad Kid Begins, was that Make-A-Wish or not?
Yes.
It was so you had to immerse yourself in the knowledge of Make-A-Wish, so getting to know those people and networking with those people. So whatever the content area is, yeah, you must network and immerse yourself.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys,
So you have to be observant, involved,
Oh,
open.
yeah. And I think also, like, I mean, for me personally, when my first film was about wrongful conviction, and after that, I was like, I needed a break from wrongful conviction. I mean, it was, one of the people in the movie slept over at my house on Thursday night, and one of them was at my wedding, and so like we're close with them as people, but I needed a break from wrongful conviction in that world. But I think now, I don't know, 8 years later, we might make that into a narrative.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
we're now, going back to that. So I think every time you do often need a break after, I don't know if you guys experienced that, but, but yeah.
And that's kind of interesting too, is, we always talk about documentaries as being windows into a world, either another culture, another moment in history, but that's true for the filmmakers as well. You get to enter a milieu, you get to enter a world. You spend 2 years in a world that you wouldn't otherwise have experienced. So that's part of the passion then, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, I think it's sort of, when we're lucky enough that we produce some other people's works now, and just because we've stumbled along long enough, like people who are just starting out. I think I always ask people, why do you want to be why do you want to be a filmmaker?
Yeah.
Like, what is the real reason? We give an example, I'll try to set it for here, where we always say, like, if you were a chef, if you want to be a chef, and you cooked like the highest end 4-star cuisine, and then the government came along and said, you can't cook, there's no more of that, which in New York is possible. Like, there's no more, you can't, no more, it's too rich for you or whatever. Would you go across the street and cook at a diner? Do you like cooking so much that it doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
venue is,
Yeah.
what you're cooking, do you like it so much, would you do that? So do you like filmmaking, or documentary filmmaking, which is specific, so much that you would do it regardless of the money? I mean, obviously you have to support yourself some way, but regardless of, it's gonna take 4 years to make a movie instead of a year because, because you don't have enough money this month to keep shooting, so you gotta go get a job and put that money. Do you like it that much? Because if not, eventually you're gonna realize whatever the thing that's driving you, whether it's money, whether it's you wanna have a nice car, with accolades, that there's some easier profession to reach that byproduct of than filmmaking, because filmmaking is tough to reach that. So I think like that's the question: what is the driving? Is it like, there was this girl and she blew me off in high school, I'm gonna really show her? There's probably some other career to get there quicker than that. I'm sure there are people in the film business who that is their driving force, but you might eventually go, oh, I could do this other thing that's easier, and you won't have the wherewithal to sort of continue.
So if you can do something else, do it. If
Yeah.
you are, right?
Well, if this
you're-
isn't the
but
thing
if
that
you're
you're,
so passionate, you have to do it, then.
you just have to. I mean, we had a guy come to us, there's a great program, or speaking of these programs, in New York for the Tribeca Film Festival, I think it's called All Access, where people submit projects. Everybody here should submit one.
Yeah, I'm in
The IFP has one where where you can submit them, and it's just in project form. Sometimes they ask you to film something a little bit, and you submit it, and hopefully they have you come and you meet with different people. We met a guy there that we liked a number of years ago. He had a project about a play and a film called The Boys in the Band, a groundbreaking, like Hollywood's first gay movie.
Yes.
And he had a budget for $750,000. And I was very excited about this project, and I went and met with him and this executive producer. I'm just like, how are you spending $750,000? And where is the $750,000 going to come afterwards, that if we gave you the money for this, are we going to get this back? Just even a chance of it. And so they went away. I'd met the guy. I called him that first day. Said, I'll do anything to get your movie made. And I saw this, and he went away. And then 6 months later, he hadn't gotten any progress. And he said, let's talk. And I said, we can do this for $100,000. The movie goes on to premiere at Berlin, Toronto, plays 26 film festivals. It played theatrically. I think it played at the Cleveland Art Museum. We made our money back, and he had all these opportunities for him. But if he had stuck to the 750, he'd still be waiting to get that movie made. So it's like, why did, at first it was he wanted to make it, but he wanted it to be his full-time job and things like that. And then he realized, I just want to get this movie made and get on with it, start my career. So
Yeah, you really do have to have that passion, because there can be some nights where you're like, oh wow, what am I doing? But you have to follow through. You just have to have that love for it, 100%.
Yeah, and then it shows, I think, too.
Yeah, it does. It
Yeah.
shows in the work.
Yeah, and I can see that in the works of yours I've seen thus far, and so many others, so many other docs at the festival too. And I've become a doc nut. We've come to that point in the period where we should open it for questions, but I realized, first of all, do any of the panelists have questions for other panelists? Give you the first shot. Okay, if not.
I mean, I'd like to know what everyone's next project is.
Okay, good. Next project, Mike.
Next project is it's early now, but it's I'm gonna call it a science fiction film set inside a children's hospital.
So it's narrative.
It's a documentary.
Oh, it is? Where?
I'm
But
intrigued.
it's set within the young adult cancer community, which is that's prior to my sort of day job working while I was making this film, was doing a lot of work, doing video projects within the young adult cancer community. And so working on a film that's going to be set within a teen-only unit. That's going to be, I guess, a hybrid documentary / science fiction.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Great. I really look forward to that. Douglas?
I asked the question, I don't want to.
No, okay.
It's a lot of
There's that
anxiety
question.
in answering that question.
Maggie doesn't have a next, are you ever going to do a film? You're going to do a
Not
film?
a documentary.
No, you're not.
I love documentaries so much, I don't want to sully it.
Oh, no. Rob?
I'm actually developing a documentary about, there's this movement that's happening with sign language interpreters at rock shows. So I started thinking about that and a life with the absence of music. So we're getting that off the ground
Yeah,
right now.
that's amazing. Dana?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I have like 3 ideas, but I'm still working on finishing Fat Kid actually, even though it's playing, but getting it out
Okay,
there.
yeah, actually, I have a quick question,
Yeah.
I'll get back to that in a
Yeah.
second, actually, I forgot. Okay, what's
Um,
next?
I'm still reeling from the experience of having made a documentary and trying to come to terms that it actually happened. And I'm like, where did the last 4 years of my life go? And I was 24 when I started, and I'm like a completely different person when I come out on the other side. So I'm still trying to figure out what's happening, and I'm actually working on a horror fiction script.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
because-
narrative.
Yeah, like
That's
that's where I come from, but
Yeah.
trying to figure out.
Well, one quick question before I open it up. I'm sorry. Dana, you mentioned you're still working on it, and that's something that was alluded to, but it wasn't hit on, and I think students don't necessarily understand this, that you go to the festival and your film is done, but but it's not done. You're going to revise it, or if it gets purchased, as a friend of mine, his film recently got purchased, and now it goes into a new round of post-production, because the people purchasing it want certain deliverables, want certain things done, shall we say. Thoughts on that?
So for my film, Bat Kid, there's some just technical things really, some like conversions that once I saw it from a DCP, which is the way we were showing it at a couple of
Yeah.
festivals, I was like, ooh, that doesn't look so good, because you can't really see it beforehand. So
Yeah.
so there's a few things that I wanted to change, but it also just got purchased. So I'm going to
Nice.
deal with them.
Congrats.
I mean, thank you, but so I'm going to deal with them on that,
Right.
and then they're also going to make a narrative of it.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, and so
Oh, we didn't get to that question. That's something my students are dealing with a lot, you
Yeah.
know, with Great Gardens and all of these, you know, examples of narrative films based on documentaries. It's a coming thing, shall we say.
Right, so I
That's
think the next
interesting.
several months are gonna be finishing the documentary and then setting them up to make the
Okay.
narrative and all that.
Cool. Anyone else want to speak to that?
About the narrative, or
No,
about
No,
the
no, I'm
being
sorry,
over.
no, about the,
Yeah, I mean, I guess that we have a current example. There was a film that we did that for some reason just was nominated for an award, even though it's late in the game. And so there's one of these digital, digital, if you think of like iTunes or Amazon or all the different places you can see a film, Netflix, that then said they wanted the film. And so we now need to go create a new version technically of that film, and it's certainly an expense that, I think once you hear about it, you go, okay, I get that. But if you think of, you're not sending, think of it like a old school music. There's the record, the cassette, the DVD, the reel-to-reel. Each one of these digital systems whether it's iTunes or Netflix or HBO show, ask for a different version of your movie. And it requires the time and the resources, which is code and filmmaking for money, to go do it.
Well, plus there might be other things like music rights. You might
Yeah.
have, you might have
I'm doing that
festival
now, too.
rights for music, but you
Yeah.
don't
And
have
that can
commercial
change,
release.
that can change, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with that right now. Like, I had 23 songs in Bad
Yeah.
Kid, and I think now I've paid for like 20 out of the 23, and so I'm just trying to check those off every
Yeah.
day.
Get yourselves a good music supervisor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Not to be
we-
underestimated.
Opening it up to the group, who has a question? Over there.
Thank you guys for coming. You mentioned the Jinx, and I'm a journalist, and that was actually my first sort of foray into documentary filmmaking, and it was sort of weird because there was a story that you had to tell, but there was also ethical issues involved with this. And obviously you guys have multiple responsibilities as documentary filmmakers to your story, to your subject, to the truth. So how do you sort of define ethics in documentary filmmaking, and when your responsibilities come into clash, so the subject and the story clash a little bit, how do you guys handle that?
That's a really tough question.
I feel like, what time is it?
Everybody's like,
I think I can try to simplify. There's no way to simplify it. It's so specific to each film. But ultimately for me, it's, will the people in my film want to kill me after I make this film, basically. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but I mean, in the kind of films that I do, which I'm dealing with people and their individual stories, it's like, how are they going to respond to it? And you can never predict that. And so I try my best to be an ethical person, and just as a filmmaker, I'm the kind of person who likes to make films. I don't want to get into a contentious relationship with the people I'm making a film about, but there still is that opportunity. And we had one guy who was a part of our film who didn't like it and voiced his opinion, but he still said he agreed. Well, you guys did this, and I let you do it, so I'm not gonna stop it from being out in the world. But it's so specific to each individual film. I mean, when I teach this, we spend days and days talking about it, and it comes up again and again. So, and the Jinx is its own sort of very special problem.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, and I also think that knowing why, I mean, I think if you use your ethical, like as you're trying to be an ethical person, the same kind of wear the same hat when you're a filmmaker, I mean, assuming you're ethical. I think for my first film about wrongful conviction, I went, you have to know what kind of story you're going in to tell. Like, I was sure that the people were wrongly convicted, and I wanted to tell the story of a wrongful conviction. I wasn't trying to prove that they were innocent. I mean, I wasn't trying to prove that they were guilty, to knowing exactly why you're going in, which brings up the Jinx. But I remember I had a big meeting at like a big agency in LA when the film was done to rep it, a sales agent, and they sat down at the table, and the guy said, well, I think the guy at the end with the earring, who was the main character of the film, who had been in the whole time, so he obviously just watched the end, I think he could have done something. And I just stood up and I was like, I'm out of here. I mean, like, because my whole goal was to make these people vindicated for being in prison for 20 years. So I was super offended, and it was this bigwig guy, who I won't say the name, but like, now whenever I see him around, I'm like, that guy said that John was guilty. But so I think going in there, knowing and not letting something else get in the way. Like, I mean, it would have been great if they had repped our film. I mean, it might have been great for my career today, but like, ethically, that was not, I couldn't even hear, I can't even stand to look at the guy. Because I just spent 3 years of my life trying to show that these guys were innocent, and he didn't have the decency to watch the whole film and then not. Anyway, can you tell I'm bitter about that?
I'd say rightfully so.
Did you want to say something else here?
I don't know if it's true or not, but I feel like filmmakers are essentially parasites. In some way, you've got to be a parasite because the story doesn't form by itself. You need to spend energy, and you need to put something external into that, and that always will create some sort of strife, either within your mind or with the characters you're shooting with, because the character's life will go on after the film. Like in a documentary, the universe is not self-contained like a narrative fiction, and the characters are aware that you're only presenting a part of that, what we want the world to see, because what will benefit our story with the story we want to tell. At a level, it is, I think, an egoistical pursuit of the filmmaker to tell the story how they see it, because we are the ones going in. So I think that ethical strife, it's important to question yourself what you're doing, and within that questioning, I think you find a middle ground, which is kind of which you would say is ethical. Like I said, it depends on the subject you're dealing with, but
Yeah.
hopefully you find a middle ground where kind of people are happy.
Yeah. Rafiq.
Yeah. So once you've chosen a subject and you've kind of embedded yourself with them, you're following them around, what are some tips and tricks that you found for yourself to not burn yourself out or burn them out? Do you say, well, look, we're only going to be following this interview with this person for 4 hours or 8 hours, or does it vary from day to day? And then how do you just not get overwhelmed or overwhelm them with your constant presence?
It's a good question. In my case, it was just like, at the end of each night, I would say, okay, cameras are going off, go do what you need to do, and you just have to give people breaks sometimes. Like, it's true, I mean, especially in the case of my film where I was with these artists, like 24/7, I was always there pointing a camera in their faces. I had to give them breaks. There were just certain times that, you just have to turn it off and let them have their lives for a minute. Because I think, to what you were saying before, there's a responsibility there because they are real people. They're not actors. They're not scripted. You kind of have to find that balance, of still telling the truth, but also realizing that they're going to have a life after this, like you said. And yeah, I think, but in my case, I gave breaks sometimes. I'd say, are you done? I'm done. Let's be done for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the two things, I don't know if they're tricks, but he's trying to think of how long the process is going to be, which I think is always longer than you think it's going to be. So you're setting expectations. So there's not like this peak early on and then you're still there, setting expectations about what's going to happen with it. What are their expectations for the film? Why are they saying yes? Like, are they imagining themselves at some big thing that's maybe going to happen or maybe not going to happen? So I think I always like to sort of downplay things like, hey, we're hoping because people do want to know, especially because of documentary is sort of a popular thing at the moment. So I think people know more about it. It's not a pre-internet era where it's like, yeah, this is going to play somewhere and no one's ever going to see it. There's more awareness, I think, of the subjects, of the reality of what's happening. So I think that expectations. And then the other thing I would say is I use an example from the movie Almost Famous for our filmmakers or for myself, where if you know that story about the young kid covering the band, and then there's that moment, so he's like, you see early on they're doing like the prayer, the band cheer or prayer, and he's sort of over here watching. And then like an hour into the movie, he's in the middle of the huddle. And I always say, like, don't go into the band prayer, don't go into the band cheer, because then I think you run this risk, because now you're such friends with them. I think it's hard then to make decisions. Just as a human, everyone wants to be liked, I think it affects the editing later. You're like, oh, should we, so he's so good there. She's now out of the movie. We don't leave that in, and I think that often leads to not as good a movie. I'd say the trick is within yourself in that way, is not getting so attached that you can't detach at the end. Obviously, the Jinx people didn't have that problem, but but I think it's an issue sometimes for filmmakers. And I will say to them, who are you making the movie for? Are you making it for the people in the movie? Are you making it for the festival programmers? Are you making it for critics? We got to keep that in there because this one guy who writes for this place is, it's like you got to make it, combination, I think, of your, for yourself, hoping that you represent an audience.
And also, if you're like following a character, for example, if your film is a portraiture and not like an issue-based standard documentary, and you're just following characters, one thing you need to train yourself to do very early on is to listen and not talk too much, and that is something which I found out while on the film, like 6 months into the film, when I was looking at the footage, that I'm constantly interrupting the characters, with my own thoughts and my questions, and I'm sometimes too eager to, push them at a certain, and that's something you kind of learn, and from my experience, I would tell you, if you want the character to open up, you need to learn how to listen. You need to train yourself. It's not as easy as it sounds. Right?
I think that's a great
Yeah.
note. I think sometimes when you're filming and you're trying to prompt, let's say even you're just following somebody, but you're still asking questions because you're trying to get something, and then they just give a short answer or not enough, and you get nervous, so you ask another question where if you sometimes just give it that extra uncomfortable moment.
That breath.
And then sometimes they'll start talking again, or that will be that moment where just looking at them, you know they don't have to say anything when you see it, but at that moment you get nervous, like they're not doing anything. I gotta poke them and
Get the
and
stick
you don't-
out and go like this. Yeah.
That is great advice to just
Yeah,
like that
that's great.
uncomfortable moment. Even like if you were practicing with a straightforward traditional interview and you ask somebody something and they don't answer, to just let it sit.
Give them that chance to breathe and think about it. Yeah.
And you need to buy extra batteries.
Yeah, lots of batteries.
Yeah.
Lots of batteries.
Like,
Absolutely.
it's true. Some of the best material I've got is when I've not asked a certain question and a conversation has ended, camera is running, the character is just looking around, and then suddenly he would look into a camera and say something, without me asking, and for that you need batteries
Yes.
and patience.
I also think I've noticed this over time too. I'm usually not I usually have a camera person with me. Often I try not even to have eye contact after a while, because if they're looking at me, they're gonna they're trying to engage me. So sometimes it might seem rude after a while, but I just kind of look around so that they just do their own thing. So it's kind of being aware of your goal really isn't. You could talk to them off camera at another time when it's not rolling, but the goal at the time when the camera is on is to get them
To
be a character in your movie, really, not be your friend. So I think there's different ways of not talking or not looking at them exactly. Reading the situation.
And it's,
That would be another thing, we always talk about not almost what is the director-actor relationship and applying those. Like if it's an interview, like things that have to do with keeping people out of the eye line. I like to engage people, so like I try and once we get things set up, stay away so we don't have the interview before we're filming,
Yes.
which happens sometimes. But what would that relationship be? Just like if you think of like the most famous director or famous actor, actress, and those sort of creating that environment, whatever that environment is, could be an environment within a very loud environment, but so that they can, be themselves. Because ultimately you're trying to get a performance out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we had a question out here.
Yeah, I know that documentaries are kind of having a peak in popularity as of late due to things I think like Netflix has been a huge push in terms of
Yes.
popularity. But I think with that and with the advent of reality TV about 15 years ago or so, I think people are experiencing a lot of skepticism slowly about documentaries. So I wondered if any of you have ever had anyone not just express skepticism, but say point blank, you made this part up, like completely doubting your story at all.
So my film is a hybrid documentary where, for the most part of it, you don't even ever see an issue coming up. It's just people talking. So I've been asked if the dialogues have been scripted, and it's kind of sometimes feels ridiculous because you can't ever script those sort of moments, and also, there's been conversation about a peak in documentaries. I would like to sort of transition to that. So I come from India, where documentary is not part of a mainstream conversation. It's you don't have Netflix in India. We don't have 80% of the population does not use credit cards. So we are not accessing any kind of online platforms to watch documentaries. So say for example, with my film, a particular struggle is that, okay, I've made a film, and now I have to do everything to make sure it doesn't die out, which is like getting into good festivals or something. So the conversation with documentary is very different out here in America than it is, back home in India. So it's like a very different journey.
Yeah. I think for us, one thing is that nowadays, the first thing that if you reach out to somebody and you want to make a film, and usually that might start with a phone call or an email, the first thing that they're going to do is Google you, which is the first thing that I do to the people that I'm making a film about. And so I think that a lot of the work that you've done already might speak to that. And so I had the experience with this last film. I had made an observational film, a short set in a hospice unit, and that film has been great in that it set me up really well to make another film in the veteran community because they saw me as somebody who could do that. We had some really interesting experiences, not with our subjects having issues, but because our film is a lot about reenactment and you don't know what's reality and what's staged, a lot of people would accuse us after, not so much after screenings, but after some of our funding presentations, like, oh, I think you staged this entire thing. And I said, like, wow, I wish I did. Like, that would have been really cool if we had done that, because it means we did a really good job of staging something. I mean, that doesn't bother me as much. It's if the characters do have an issue with it. And people are savvy too, and I think that they understand the ways in which films are constructed more now than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
Yeah.
see reality TV, I think that they're, you give both your audience and give the people in your film a lot of credit. And our film made some wild leaps in terms of the narrative and the order of things, but I don't think the guys in our film had a problem with it.
I also think that film programmers and some funders, not all of them, but a lot of funders, programmers can sniff stuff out really quickly. And sometimes it's something staged or something not entirely organic is okay, and sometimes it's not. But luckily, those of us who are trained to watch hours and hours and hours of other people's films, you do get a sense of things, and you have an internal barometer that tells you when something is not okay and when something is okay, or services a story or doesn't.
Question over there.
Okay, actually, I have two questions. The first one is, there should be some classified, like, appears in your film. How do you, to address these concerns or inform issues? Like, what if they don't want to appear in a film?
If your subject doesn't want to appear in a film.
If it's the main subject, that's probably a big problem. If it's a supporting, character, then I'm not sure how much. But there might be a way to construct something completely without that person. I think it depends on the subject. I mean, if you look at, this is an extreme example, but you had the film about Marlon Brando that just came out, and it's all footage just from his past that they constructed. But is there a specific example you're thinking of that you're trying to do?
Right. Actually, I'm not a film student, and actually, I'm not sure how to start this career. And I have an iPad, especially iPad mini, and I have some classes, and I have some interesting topics. And I'm trying to make some parts of my documentary. But I don't know if I learned by myself how to cut my movie and how to make a whole documentary, and what if I finally make it and it is my film, but I can't make it to change for money and nobody knows it. So how start this career for a non-film movie? Especially
Well,
for
I say
students.
be a film student. Because that's why we're here. Mike and I and people like us are, trying to give people the tools, the ideas and the tools, and the motivation.
You can just sort of go. I mean, it's not like you're shooting on film.
That's
It used to
true.
be when you're shooting on film, and you
Just do it.
just do it. I mean, and often I'll just go out and, like, if I'm trying to teach myself, when I started shooting with the Canon 7D, it's a different experience of shooting with that camera. And I would say, like, okay, today I'm going to go out and shoot some event that's happening and just stay there for 3 or 4 hours, and I'm going to watch all the footage on the big screen and look at it. And it's kind of like training. It's something that we really don't do a lot of in documentary, but really just giving myself those chances. Or the other thing too is working on other people's films is really
Yes.
critical
Yeah.
too. I mean, I would always volunteer to do shoots, and I would shoot stuff, especially earlier on when I was working, when I was getting started, like just do anything, honestly, like working on really maybe even not the best stuff, but you can learn from good filmmakers and you can learn from bad filmmakers too, and see everybody makes mistakes, and they're always making mistakes, and the best filmmakers, I know people who've made, won Academy Awards and have a steady stream of money from HBO. Every film they look at and they talk about it as like a flawed piece.
Right.
And also, if you're trying to make a film, you are a film student.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you're going to learn if you want to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
One more. We're running out of time, believe it or not. One more question, Joni.
Yeah, I have a question for Abe Kumar. I saw your film, and I understand that initially your purpose was to document your brother's recovery, and that purpose changed as you found more footage. Now, you were there for 2 years at a school that must have been aware of you there. You were there not only at very private shootings, but at very public ones too, where all the students were talking. What impact is it going to have, considering you said after the film that the authorities had never seen the film and were possibly, I can't help but think, not aware of the new direction that it took? What impact is that going to have on the students that were in the film and possibly on your future activities?
So basically, the authorities still don't know that the film exists. And, fortunately or unfortunately, and you know, with documentaries, like there's a certain, like, documentaries outlive their filmed universe. That's a problem. And unfortunately, in India right now, we have this right-wing government which is kind of banning everything which is, you know, even partly challenging any sort of image they want to project. So it's very important, it was very important for us to protect the film, insulate it as much as possible before it gets banned, you know. Because it's something, it deals with a problem which is never spoken about in India, student depression. And especially in the urban elite, like, you know, you always see stories coming from India which are about this rural landscape and, you know, in a very typical cultural sort of a setting. But dealing with an intangible problem, it's important that we take the film back to India and make sure it's not banned before it's seen by people. So what we did was we kept it very low-key. All the trailers we made were essentially very, the trailers served to hide the real subject of the film beneath its hybrid kind of a layer, you know. So there was a situation where we crowdfunded for the film. We made a trailer. The crowdfunding campaign obviously failed because we weren't really telling people what the film was about. So I had students from the school telling me how this film looks like an amazing film. They had no idea it was about their college, you know. And only the 4 characters who we filmed know that there's a film about film being made. And I was very clear that the film is not about a particular institution. The institution is a metaphor for the highest premier education institution which can happen anywhere in the world. So, and it's a personal story, like it progresses as a very personal story, and until a point where reality takes over and something happens which forces me to, you know, just walk out in the open. Now, again, I took a chance. I walked in the administration's office with a camera, right, openly. But such was the state of affairs that they just assumed that I was a student. They were not aware that an outsider would be living there like that. And it is a ridiculous scenario if you think of it. Why would anyone do that? It's like crashing a wedding, you know. You just, you walk in and you hope that they don't ask who you are.
Just act like you belong there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 2 years, though.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
Well, we're actually out of time, so if you have more questions of Abhay, I think that opened, you know, it brought us to more questions as well, what he said, but an amazing array of ideas. Great educators here up on the stage, right? I think we learned a lot, very articulate, and I really appreciate all panelists' cooperation. We have another panel starting in about 10 or 15 minutes. We have panels all day. Feel free to come back. But let's thank our panelists once again.